885.
Praise the Lord. Can we say praise the Lord? Praise the Lord. First of this year, the Lord gave me a message, and it dealt with New Year's resolutions. And so many times we ask the Lord for material things.
Are tuned in to Healing Our Land's live interactive broadcast here on the Boston Praise Radio and TV Network. I'm your host, Pastor Hobbs, and we are so excited to be live here in the studio and to have our interview of our very first candidate who is running for District 3 City Council. In fact, it's our very first interview for any candidate in this particular municipal election that's happening. So he is actually our friend. He's our brother. He is a former broadcaster here on Boston Praise Radio and TV Network in the person of Barry Lawton. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Pastor Hobbs. I'm doing great. Hopefully we can keep that order going.
What order?
Order of appearance. You know, if I'm the first candidate, I want to stay in that spot from here all the way to November.
Amen. Well, you know, we have to be nonpartisan.
Yes. Well, it's actually a nonpartisan race. So
it is nonpartisan. And when you say that, what do you mean?
No parties. No Democratic parties. No party distinction like the legislature. Yes.
Oh, that's a good point of distinction.
Right. So that's, you know, some people put their party affiliation on signs, but generally you don't see them in municipal elections.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Good point. Again, who knew, right?
Right.
So, and that's interesting because I did see, I saw, as we have an intern, Nasir, who has been outstanding. I am just so proud of this young man, with this young man who's here in the studio being your son, who's behind the scene that folks can't see, but one of your twins.
Yes.
And he's been here before as a co-host of your broadcast.
Right.
And
I kicked him out the show because he kept checking me.
Listen.
He still is. Look at it. He's got this pen in his book. He's like, you mess up here, I got notes.
You taught him well. You trained him well, right? So, but no, it's very exciting. Just what you have done in the community, you know, and the fact that you are running for this. I actually live in District 3, so it's personal to me. I will say this: I'm happy that there are this is the most candidates are running in this particular race than any other district, or even for at-large city council. It's the most contested seat. And I'm happy about that, honestly, that there is some competition, that there's some new blood out there. You know, I'll leave that at that, you know.
Okay.
But I'm
it's
happy.
wonderful.
Yeah.
It's actually wonderful because that bodes well for greater turnout.
Yes.
And getting people involved in democracy. And that's one of the reasons that I'm running. Mm-hmm. Our voice. Mm-hmm. We need to speak up as a people using the democratic process. We've watched it done in history in other communities, among other groups. We need to do it. And we have the greatest challenge in this district because it's a new district, and it just didn't come about without any type of struggle. I think it played out in the newspapers, in the television, in the press, at the water bubblers in the office, at home, talking about how that district was created. And once again, as I've always said, we're very smart people in Massachusetts and in Boston. You know, we modeled, the U.S. Constitution is modeled after us. So we're doing some things right, but we're suffering from a social lag. And I think that social lag, is evident to other parts, in comparison to other cities across the nation. We have a uniqueness. We have a dichotomy in our history. And I think right now in this race is trying to get all the voices together instead of having them divided and competing against each other. There needs to be a unity of purpose here. And when you think about it, the challenge of democracy and what we face in Boston, we have one of the most segregated cities in the country. And it was planned that way. It just didn't happen that way. Mm-hmm. So when you look at those factors, there's a lot of reasons why we don't have a voice. People, when I'm campaigning and I see young people and even old people say, I don't bother to vote. I'm like, why not? Because it doesn't make any difference. Mm-hmm. And, increasingly over time, it's harder and harder to make that argument to them because there aren't receipts, there aren't evidence. Look what we did here, look what we did here. When you think about it in terms of our body politic, the last time there was an exercised heartbeat for communities of color, and black people in particular, was in 1983. The residuals of the Black Political Task Force coming together, fighting that lawsuit, creating districts for greater representation, and then Mel King having that very close race with Ray Flynn. I mean, certainly there have been, shots of adrenaline through maybe the Deval Patrick candidacy, the Obama candidacy that you might have seen, but it was nothing that was sustained. So the people's voice is very important. You look at some of the go ahead.
Go ahead.
When you look at some of the examples, and I believe that we have a loss of democracy. Understanding the difference that Boston, the history of Boston, has made us different people. It has divided us, and there needs to be some reparations on that. And we know that there's conversations, coming on about that. It's a good thing that we start examining our past and acknowledging it, and it's a city that we're doing that. It's not the most important thing right now, but for people like me, as you know, we've been fighting for the right to people to have public hearings, and that's one of the roles and one of the jobs of the city councilors. What has happened, unfortunately, over the past decades is those things that are granted hearings are basically done on political expediency and not exercising political courage to move us as a society forward.
I love that distinction between political expediency and what do you say, political, was it leadership?
Yeah, I mean, basically, what we have here is almost a separate industry of leaders, right? And especially in our community, we have people that, and in the past, we have elected people that when they come out and they run, and when they initially speak to us, they have all these ideas and things that sound good, and they can articulate them well.
Yep.
But when there's a first opportunity to move up, to move out, to cash out, to gone. And, in the 5th Suffolk District, where I've run previously for the legislature, we had 5 elected officials leave early before the end of their term, meaning that we didn't have coverage during a budget process longer than anybody in the Commonwealth. And that's happened here. And I think that's a bad habit that we've been in, and I think that needs to change. And so I'm very hopeful. Because I've seen this opposition before. Anybody that wants status quo will probably view me as opposition. And I believe it's important for us to change. We have to be concerned, yes, about our current comfort, how we're living, what our economy is, but 50% of that has to be placed on young people and the next generation, because they're going to be taking care of us some of these times. So we have to prepare them, and not only prepare them to have good education, to make sure that they're safe, but to make sure that they understand what good citizenship is, how you bring people together, how important it is. It's simple math. We are more powerful with numbers.
Let me ask you, so with that said, first of all, let's go back to District 3. Because District 3 is no longer what District 3 was prior to this election, correct? And help me if I'm wrong, because I know there's been a lot of controversy over these maps.
Right.
And so we've gone through a redistricting process, and the maps were challenged. So I just want to be clear in my understanding, as well as our listening and viewing audience, the district map, because I understand even Joel Richards, who will be coming on the next hour, who's running for that same seat, was in District 4, but then the lines were drawn. Now he falls into District 3 and is running for District 3. But so some people who were in different places are now in District 3 who were not in District 3. So the lines have been changed. And so to be clear, where are the lines now?
The lines are meandering from one end of the district. You can go right, left, north, south at any point in the line. I would just address it like this.
Yeah.
The district didn't really change that much
Okay.
as far as voting blocks and things like that. It didn't change that much. But ironically, it didn't really matter to me because I've served parts of this district since 1978 when I started as a legislative aide, when I had to deal with the issues that were facing the community. I had Roy Bowling Jr. was my first boss, and one of the things that I remembered that he would say is, you need to bring home the bacon, number one, and then he would tell me, once a week, go out and find something to fix. Go out and find a problem. And in doing that, it kind of embedded the consciousness into me to always be looking around, what can I improve? Who needs a pedestrian stick? Who needs a crosswalk? We actually got a pedestrian stick up here in Wells Ave, from my efforts. But, this is one of the reasons why it distinguishes me as a candidate. I believe it's important to nudge the status quo, to nudge them to give us something equal. So, for example, for the pedestrian sticks that I've been fighting for 20 years, because I believe pedestrian sticks, and if anybody doesn't know what they are, those yellow things in the middle of the road by state law, which is why I bugged Representative, my legislators and Representative Holmes to say, you need to be in this fight too because this is state law. And basically what that does is slows traffic down. And when Ayanna first was elected to the city council, I lobbied her and lobbied her and lobbied her, and we were able to get 5 pedestrian sticks up on Blue Hill Avenue. A part where people would walk over to Washington Mall, do their shopping, and they'd have to cross the street, like at Woodbine Street or Indivo. We got those sticks up there. They were valuable, and it said, you matter. And your safety matters. So when the 2017 elections came by, I was very ready to be very vocal. It was a mayoral election year, also municipal elections for councilors. And I was ready to pick up my pen, as you know I'm inclined to do in writing about things and publishing op-ed opinions, and said, I'm going to go crazy if we don't get some pedestrian sticks. And lo and behold, actually one of your co-host from Boston Praise Radio, Tracy Lithcott, was assigned to me to drive around literally for months and hours to look at the pedestrian stick situation in other parts of the city and where we were. As a result, I requested 39 pedestrian sticks for areas including parts of South Boston, many in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and got 19 of the 13. After the election was over, they were all gone.
Oh, really?
All of them. And so what that showed me is that even a common citizen can have a voice. Even a common citizen can apply pressure to get things done. I'm running for this office, so I don't have to do all of that nudging. I can go and say to the people of this district, you need a pedestrian stick. You're going to get there. You're going to get one, or somebody's going to have to explain to me. I'm running to be a cheerleader and a fighter for this district. And if you don't treat people in my district well, there's a lot that comes with that. And throughout my history, I think people know what I bring, and I'm going to bring that for the people of the district.
So talk about a little bit about what you bring, because you mentioned being a legislative aide for Roy Bowling Jr., right? So many people may know you, and many people may not know you. So educate those whom as if they did not know you. And our listening and viewing audience, who is Barry Lawton, some of your experience. You just tell us what you want us to know about who is Barry Lawton and some of your experience that qualifies you to be the District 3 City Councilor.
Well, maybe you need a 2-hour show.
Right. Well, this is just the beginning, so you'll be. Hopefully, once we get everybody to come on, we'll have people to come back.
Well, first of all, let me start off by saying Boston is my home.
Okay.
It's not where I'm from, but I was born on Fort Jackson, South Carolina. My family is from Columbia, South Carolina, and the Low Country, Allendale specifically, Latta, Sumter, Ridgeland, on the low country of South Carolina. And my grandfather worked in the railroad industry for 50 years. My grandmother in Columbia worked as a domestic aide. My other grandfather was a farmer, World War I veteran, and raising 9 kids. So I have a perspective from a farmer and from an urban dweller. So those are my roots. We followed my father. We lived in Germany, where I got the first job I could get as an altar boy, serving Mass when they had it in Latin, and it was an hour. And I embraced that because I saw my parents go off to work every day. And I always wanted to emulate what they did. So I said, what can I do? So I did that. And I found when we moved from Germany in the mid-'60s to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I was greeted with this place where I had a new perspective. And, going to Fort Bragg on 301 highway, you would see, welcome, you're in Klan country. I mean, billboards of this. And I was like, whoa, because we didn't have this on military bases. But I was honored again to serve Mass for the 82nd Airborne Division while I was there. So I've been about service all of my life, as my family has. Now, my father, whose name is on the School of Continuing Education at Hampton University, he founded it in the mid '80s after finishing his military career as a colonel. It was ironic that when he retired in the early '80s, he went into my mother's business, who was a travel agency, and he worked for her. So I have 2 very strong role models to follow. And I try to emulate that with my kids. I came up to Boston University when he was assigned at the Pentagon and ran track for them. Was very fortunate enough to get an athletic scholarship. And I learned my activism there, co-founding the NAACP in my junior year in 1977.
You say you founded?
Co-founded with my very close friend Sonali Bustamante, who is now Sonali Wilson, and we co-founded it. Her father was actually a line brother of Martin Luther King, and an attorney for Jesse Jackson. So I was kind of thrust into an indigenous world of politics and also a national world of politics. So even back then, the NAACP had the Black Agenda for the 80s, where we brought in national leaders and we had a discussion. Jesse Jackson came in and spoke to people. So I've been active very well. And at that time, I was able to meet John O'Brien, Doris Bunty, all these people, because they were coming together to organize something called the Black Political Task Force, where they said we need to have an impact. We need to do what we need today, consolidate our vote, get people involved, cover the polls, and do all those things. So I was a charter member. We used to meet every Saturday in Northeastern in a large room. We probably averaged 40, 50 people a meeting. John O'Brien hosted it. Mel King also co-hosted, but you had people like Doris Bunty there. They were all partners, and we all met together, and we all had one objective, and those were good numbers. So everybody has their own individual agendas, but at that time it was important for us to put aside the agendas and work there. So I've just been very active. I've been fortunate to work in the House of Representatives, as I've said, for Royal Bowling Jr., but I was press secretary a few times for State Senator Diane Wilkerson. I also had the honor of being Assistant Director of Personnel for Governor Michael Dukakis, where I learned how to get people jobs, where I learned to go to places and provide opportunities that weren't there before. I visited the prisons. I visited all of them because I had a gold card from the governor's governor's office. I'd like to take a tour of the prison. Ironically, when I was in there, I'd hear Mr. Lawton, because sometimes some of my former students from 24 years, I would see them there. And so I went to look for problems. And starting in the legislature, dealing with the Department of Corrections, getting people jobs, it was a regular part of breathing. And so I'm trained to be able to do this. So anybody that works in my district that needs a job, I want them to call me. I don't really know about the other candidates as well, but on my brochures, my personal cell phone number, you can call me. And when I'm elected city councilor, you'll still have that access, because I think it's important for people to have that access.
They'll still have that access.
They have it now. It's all over the district.
Yeah, but I'm saying they'll still have it because we've heard that, and we've not. And I'm just saying we've heard they'll still be accessible.
Yeah,
and that has not been the case for some people once they've gotten into.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the things that's interesting. Frank Baker, who I've known for a number of years, I've had his personal cell phone number, and he returns phone calls. Now, of course, we have disagreements on those phone calls. But I plan to continue that tradition. That's the way you do it. That's the way you used to do it. When somebody calls you, you call them back. You make yourself accessible. What are they going to ask you? They're going to ask you, "What are you doing for us?" "I'm already out here. You want to know? Call me."
No, I think it's very important. I think it's very, very important. Even people talk about having district offices, right?
Yes.
And sometimes that's a campaign promise that doesn't manifest ultimately once a person's in office.
Hey, I'm just trying to get a campaign office, all right? Just one step.
No, not saying you. No. And I get you. But just things as being even accessible, right? So your phone number, right? That is, important whether you have a district office or you don't. If you're not accessible.
I'm not afraid to talk to you, anyone, at all. Beautiful. So I think that's important.
It's very important. Very, very important. So that's some of your experience. You said you were a teacher. How long were you a teacher, and where?
I started my teaching career in 1988. After I sold my business, I had a travel agency.
Wow.
It was a spinoff, and my mother made me go work a year at Crimson Travel before she would hire me to come work in a family business, honestly. So I had an office at Park Street Station, over the Mug and Muffin, the third floor.
I used to work at the Mug and Muffin. Oh my goodness, that's really going way back.
Yeah. And I had an office there for about 4.5 years. I had Boston Bank Commerce was my bank. They were just right down the street, and it was just very difficult to stay in business without capitalization. I ended up, because in those businesses you have to do business with the government or entities that have a delay in billing and paying and things like that, and I ended up my profit margin going down just to be able to get credit to cover the costs that I have, because in the airline business, you have to pay for your tickets and your accommodations at the end of the week. There's no playing around with that. So I sold the business and ran for office, and was unsuccessful when I first ran for office in 1988 for state rep in my area in Dorchester. I started substitute teaching at the Jeremiah Burke High School, and there was a wonderful woman. Her name was Kathleen Flannery.
Okay,
and I was like, this is an all-black school, and this was almost like reliving the White Shadow. All right, she was there. She was so kind. She was so wonderful, and she kept hiring me. And she, rather than say, "I'm going to keep you here at this school," she says, "Barry, you're needed in other parts. Right now, there's a plaque at a school in the district, at the Edward Everett School, a school that she eventually left the Jeremiah Burke to become principal, and just did some innovative things there. She passed away at a very young age, but there's a plaque that's there at the school." So after that, I went. I taught at the Edwards Middle School in Charlestown, and so I got a different view of the city there. And then I went to the Yamana Barnes Middle School in East Boston, taught for a while. Then I went back into government, and I think that's around the time I joined State Senator Diane Wilkerson's staff. And middle school it's tough. It's tough for school. So I said, you know what? I think I can deal better with older students. So I took an assignment with the first high school that I was offered, which was Dorchester High School. And it was wonderful, because actually the principal of the high school was a track official in NCAA track. And so I had actually known him for years while I was running at Boston University. And so he gave me an opportunity to teach there, and I fell in love with teaching. The following year, Jeremiah Burke lost its accreditation. They could no longer grant diplomas.
Wow.
And Dr. Stephen Leonard, who was an innovator in education, very courageous man, got basically kind of a gold card to be able to raid any school that he needed to try to put together a crackerjack staff, which he did. and ultimately we got our accreditation back. And then I went to where'd I go? I went to East Boston High School to teach, and after that I went to Madison Park for a couple of years, and then I returned back to East Boston High where I finished my career. Kind of had that military brat thing going on every 3 or 4 years. It's good to reset the button. So it was a real good opportunity. And I also had the opportunity of serving as a building rep at 3 schools, at Jeremiah Burke, East Boston High School, and at Madison Park, the 3 of the largest staffs in the cities. And the staffs trusted me for my leadership abilities, the ability to protect a union contract, to mediate issues that were necessary. And each time, in these major schools, I was given that opportunity. So I'm asking the people of District 3 to also give me that opportunity to serve.
Let me ask you, so with regard to education, being you have such an extensive experience in education and understanding this being the educational mecca of the world, with these higher institutions of learning, people come from all over the world to go to these institutions here in Boston and in Massachusetts, that unfortunately many people who live right here in Boston who are relegated to public school systems are getting substandard education. So addressing that, right? We got charter schools, and that's great for those who have the benefit and the privilege of going there. We understand, even with that said, that even if you go there and you're fortunate to go there, that if you don't do well, you have some challenges, and they tell you can no longer be there, the resources that are allocated to go to that school for you when you go back to the public school system don't go with you back to the public school system.
Yes.
So the whole charter public school kind of issue. And let's go to the elected school committee, because that's a big one. And it's been resoundingly clear here in the city of Boston that the residents have spoken and want a fully elected school system like every other city across this Commonwealth. And God bless our mayor, but who has been apparently tone deaf to say that I'm going to do this hybrid that she has talked about in full, fairness to her consistently through her campaign, and has held on to that even now that we've elected her to represent us. So I'm going to stop there and let you...
You better, because I can't remember much more after that. I don't
Unpack
know.
that.
Listen to me. And Jean McGuire said to me, and I spoke with her a few days ago, said to me, she said, what is a hybrid school committee? And I don't know. I always associate hybrid with corn. I don't know. It's like, I don't even know. But... it's not truly representative, because the mayor still has the majority, so it doesn't really change much. But let me try to take them and remember the order that you brought it in. The problem with quality education just doesn't exist in primary or secondary school. It exists for opportunities in higher ed. When you look at it, but schools like Boston University, Northeastern, and all that, look at the percentage of African Americans. Look at the percentage of Bostonians. They're sitting right up in here.
Yep.
They're using the Boston Police. They're using the Boston Fire. They're driving on Boston streets, right? So we have to provide them with services. Where's the return? There needs to be greater community benefit, greater investment in that. So, separating and understanding that it's more ubiquitous than just the Boston public schools. I think for me as a teacher, and my values and my guiding principle is, I'm going to teach that child, and I'm going to treat that child just like I would treat mine.
Yeah.
And so it's wonderful on the campaign trail to hear that, Mr. Lawton, and then they would be with their friend and they'd say, this guy, first of all, you don't wear hats in the building around him, because it would be in his desk drawer and you would have to come to his room and get it. You would get it at the end of the day, but you were going to have a little conversation before that, as to why the hat. It's not just a rule that we have arbitrarily. It's just showing that you have the ability to have a sign of respect for where you are, and the same thing with speaking and language. So I have a more functional view of saying, these are my children too. So that's how I guided that. And I think my students appreciated that. And I think my colleagues, for electing me to be their representative in the building, also recognize that. education has changed over the past 20 years. It's turned into a thing that we are going to get orders from the federal government, and they're going to attach some kind of carrot to it, and that's money, and that means more money we can spend. Not all that money is good money, right? And when you're talking about whatever George Bush said, what was it, a step ahead? I can't remember what it was. I don't remember what it was, but it was the federal mandates that came in here that kind of changed the character of Boston. We turned from a teaching town to a testing town where we're judging. And then when you even think about the judgment, you know, one of the reasons I'm also running in this district is because for years I've been a visionary on where we're going if we don't do something, which is why I filed 11 pieces of legislation that would still be good today. Ironically, in the Boston Herald, last week or over the weekend, they were talking about getting rid of the MCAS. I was like, the MCAS was very bad for education. Certainly, it's a very good tool for teachers. It's a very good tool, evaluative tool, but it's not a good judgment tool, right? And it altered education. So we were doubling up on math courses. Social science courses were suffering. Art courses were suffering. Music, the things that make a well-rounded individual. Yeah. Our fixation was on testing. And I think a lot of these principals were saying, all I need to do is get my test scores up here, and then I'm free to do whatever I want. And they did, some of them. You know, when you look at how the Boston Public Schools is, now I'm going to get to the question about the elected school committee. Ironically, it was the District 3 city councilor, the first city councilor, Councilor Jim Byrne, Honorable Jim Byrne, who introduced the measure to get rid of the elected school committee.
Interesting.
And, you know, I'm a believer in a mistake is not a mistake until you refuse to correct it. So I'm coming in there understanding that you don't eliminate the voice of the people. You just listen harder. You can't say, I don't want to hear what you have to say. You don't have a role. In those 30 years, we've had 11 superintendents. We've had 5 mayors. We've had declining population, deteriorating buildings that are putting a huge environmental impact in our area, which is a heat island, which is a pollution mecca bubble, making things worse. I think it's time to have the people come in and say, enough is enough. This hasn't really worked out for us the way we thought it would. So I think it's time for the people to be involved. Almost 8 out of 10 people in a non-binding resolution said, we want this. Yeah. We want what the other 350 cities and towns in Massachusetts have. Yes. And probably getting into the 90 percentile, upper 90 percentiles when you look at all of New England and having an elected school board. I think this is a travesty. I know that's a cliche word, but this is incredulous. It's incredulous that this situation would intend. And, you know, ironically, there are some people that are running for office and in office that are fine with that elected school committee. I don't think so. And, you know, it also eliminates a breeding ground for young leaders, right, to have new ideas. For us as an electorate to be able to say, well, they got on the school committee and they served us well. Maybe it's time for them to, go to the Boston City Council. There's a way to earn your way. I mean, when you look at our leaders, some of them, many of them, even candidates, I've never heard of them before. They don't have a history, but they are willing to do what's necessary to maintain the status quo. And if they're good tools, they'll do that.
They'll do. So your position is one of support of a fully elected school committee. Fully elected by the people. And as a city councilor, obviously, you know, again, ultimately, it is the mayor's decision. I mean, we know that the ultimate, it seems like the way that our city council is structured, that, and again, it seems they've done some things different to change more power for the city council to influence the budget. They've made some changes, but before, it really seemed like it was really, that was their primary real power, was yay or nay in terms of passing the mayor's budget. Right. So though unanimously the city council can say, we want this, she can override it and say, no, I don't want a fully elected school committee. Right. So, you know, bottom line is the people have spoken. Yeah. And so when they've spoken and you do something different,
the time to evaluate. Time to evaluate.
I mean, if you're not hearing, we elect people to represent us.
And I understand. And I would say this. I was at a forum the other day, and I said that I had the honor of serving as chair of the All Dorchester Sports League for about 6 years, a league that was brought together to bring about racial harmony, that funded a unity of purpose for young people to be focused on winning something, winning a game together. And that helped change a generation. I also served in the Dannemore Boys Club. When I came on, it was Boys Club. When I left, it was Boys and Girls Club. It was a wonderful institution. Dan and Bob Marr, their father put their money in that organization. And that was a resource for my kids. They learned how to swim there. And in other places. It took them a while to learn how to swim, but we learned over a series of places. Those are one of the institutions. I served in those institutions years before I even had kids. So it's important to understand that education is not just a responsibility of parents, that there are people out here. You don't have to have a kid to care about kids, right? You can have nieces and nephews and all that. It's important. They are our next generation, as I said earlier, and we need to make sure they're prepared, and we all need to invest in there. Now, listen, we waste money.
Yeah.
This city wastes money.
Yes.
And I'm about cutting that waste,
Amen.
right, and redirecting that funding.
That's wonderful to hear, because it's true. It's very true. With that said, there's a few issues I want to make sure that we cover. So with the school, that thank you for making that that clear stance as it relates to one.
And I would also have to say on the MCAS, as far as a graduation requirement, private school doesn't have to do it.
Oh,
right. So you're already institutionalizing a stigmatization, saying that you have to take the MCAS, but you don't have to. If you have enough money to go to private school, if you have enough money,
you don't have to reach this standard.
No, you don't. It's not a requirement.
Wow.
So, and I've been yelling and screaming about that.
I didn't know that.
I feel like I'm on the outer limits of one of those sci-fi shows where I'm talking and I'm screaming and nobody's hearing me. They're just like, what?
Well, I'm hearing you, and I hope that our listening and viewing audience is hearing you, because that education, I didn't even know that. And again, you're talking about, so you have the benefit of going to a more quality school, because it shouldn't be that, but that's really what it is. Right. And so with that said, you have a lower standard, but it's more.
It's different. What the heck? Yeah. Listen, the bargain was made between the people. If you matriculate through this school system for 13 years, this is what you get.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That was a promise of the district. This is one of the things that I tried to nudge Senator Nick Collins on in filing legislation, because, first of all, eliminating that stigmatization. But just imagine all the young people that were not able across the Commonwealth, of all colors, of all ilks, of all parts of this Commonwealth, that would be released from that if you said, listen, we're going to eliminate that requirement because it wasn't even right, and we're not even sure if the test works. Right? We're going to eliminate that. Do you imagine how many people would get their diploma now? Right? And you wouldn't even have to go out and find them. All you'd have to say is, we are open now for you to get something that you earned, that your parents earned, and they will show up, and they'll get that. And so education is supposed to help. It's not supposed to judge you or judge you harshly like that. And I would say that one of the major impediments to learning is the students being there. And in 1998, I filed legislation, one of the 11 pieces of legislation I filed, to provide free unlimited MBTA passes during the summer. That meant commuter rail, the boats, whatever, the whole thing, for those students that met certain attendance requirements. And it would help the family that had multiple people in school, but it would help the family. It would provide motivation for that kid to get up, motivation for the parent to get that kid up, because you can't learn if you're not in school.
It's interesting you say that. The young man, Nasir, again, who is one of our youth interns doing an extraordinary job, he said that very same thing. And I
told him.
You told him?
No, I'm kidding.
I'm serious. Well, you would think you did, because that's exactly what he said.
Well, he sends enough emails to confirm my appearance here, so I'm like, I gotta take a minute to respond to this guy.
Yeah, he's great. He's really great. But no, that's exactly what he proposed. And as you said, not just that, but also for the commuter rail. Some people come further distance, and you should be able. He was saying, I should be able to actually show my student ID.
Well,
and that should be sufficient.
let's just pivot to commuter rail, right? With this purple line, which they put up about 10 years ago, which could have been put up 40 years ago because the tracks were there.
Yeah.
Right? They should be free. From the time you cross that Boston border, they should be free. First of all, if you've ever gone to any of these commuter rails in our community, the one on Bowdoin and Geneva Avenue,
yes,
it's got 2 parking spots.
That's it.
They're handicapped parking spots.
Wow.
It has no crosswalk.
What?
It has no pedestrian stick.
Oh my goodness.
It takes you almost 200 to 250 meter walk to get to where the train is. Once you get in the station. You've got to walk past urine smells, dark spots, all kinds of stuff to get up in there. Nobody's going to ride that train unless it's free.
Unless it's free. Unless it's free.
So I think one of the things that I would push for, because if you look at it, the community in parts of Dorchester, transportation was more modern 100 years ago when they had light rail systems connecting neighborhoods and communities. Right now, if you look on that MBTA map and you see how they have those lines, that big old gap, that's mostly us, right? So you look at between the orange line and you look at the red line, that gap, we know where that gap is. That's Roxbury, part of this district. That's that gap. And so in the last 10 years, they added a little purple line to go over to make that gap a little smaller. But nobody's going to ride that. So you have to incentivize. We have to incentivize a lot of things just across the board. One of the other things that I filed in the areas that I've had experience is dealing with criminal justice and reentry programs. I filed a piece of legislation, again, in 1998. This is what I'm talking about, a vision, values, and a vow. I filed legislation to reduce the sentences of non-sexual, non-violent offenders commensurate with whatever help they needed, whether it was getting education. That story was in the paper last week. 2 stories that I wrote legislation for in 1998 are now prominent and up here. It was important to try to incentivize, to change behavior. And whether it was vocational education, whether it was a treatment for drug addiction, whether it was getting a GED, BS, JD, whatever it was, something to make sure that we invested in them, that they're coming out better, right? But, you can't just do that and say, we're going to make you all better and not have doors open for them when you come out. These are the types of things when you're looking at, as a city councilor, they may not all be under my aegis or auspice or under my jurisdiction, but I damn well can talk about it. I'm sorry I did that. I'm in the church. I'm in the basement of a church. Don't strike, Lord.
I got you. You mean it. You mean it. You're serious.
In a heavenly way.
Yes, sir.
I'm about action.
Yeah.
I'm about moving. And, I'm an equal opportunity criticizer, or I would say nudger. You will find people from a lot of different ilks that I believe represent the status quo in a good or a bad way. That I'm the common enemy because I can't be bought. I won't be bought. And, I've sacrificed my whole life in being in a position where I could be of integrity. Let
me ask you, so when we go back to a few things, is when we go back to schools, right? So right now, one of the issues is the John D. O'Brien. Again, I heard there was a press conference to move that school, right, to someplace else. Have you heard about this whole controversy around the mayor desiring to, in fact, it was a press conference without any input from the community. A lot of folks who are graduates are furious that was even that decision was made without the input of the community. And so, they're talking about that in connection to Madison Park and Vocational, making this premier school, but in another area, taking it from the area that they haven't even maximized, giving the benefit to the people who live right within this city. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, when you feel a rumbling in Roxbury, it ain't an earthquake. It's those people, those pioneers that got that school that are rolling around in their graves right now saying, in the words of Vince Lombardi, what in the hell's going on out here? Again, here I am in the church doing this.
Yes,
all right.
I get it.
I've just been a candidate for a couple of months. So
it's all good.
All right. So, no, John, I know John. I know these people. I knew Mel. I knew these people. They would not want that asset that they worked so hard to get here to go. And just think about it. It's not just an issue about the people that are going to school and that live in the neighborhood in Roxbury. Think about the people in Charlestown. Think about the people in East Boston. I can tell you, teaching in East Boston High School, I had students that lived with me on Mount Ida Road in Dorchester that were commuting from Mattapan for Hyde Park because parents wanted them to go to a school that was out of the neighborhood because they were worried about their kids getting home from school, right? So when you look at this creates a burden there are a lot of bad reasons not to do it, but I think it's a treasure.
So you're opposed to it?
I'm absolutely opposed to it. I don't even know why the concept
even
is
being considered.
It's a loss.
It is. We've lost so many things. Harriet Tubman, we're losing, right? These few places that we fought for.
And when you're losing and you weren't getting a lot in the first place,
it's a problem.
You got an issue.
It's a problem. Okay. So with that said, you mentioned the education and holding institutions of higher learning to more accountability. So the pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes, right? That they're not paying, anything in lieu of the taxes. They're sprawling out all across the city, taking up land.
Like Pac-Man.
Yes.
Remember?
Yes.
Yes.
And not giving back.
Bottom line is we need stuff. Okay. We need opioid treatment.
God, yes.
I mean, what the... Okay.
Yes. Right?
Yes.
What in the world?
Yeah. Jolly D. Whittaker's. Listen, this problem is staring us in the face. We see this. We see the.
If you want to jump in, go ahead. You got to get on the mic though. If you go ahead.
I would say more.
We want to hear you.
I can get on the mic. It's deja vu all over again.
Right, here we go.
No, put on the earphones.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would think that more BPS students need access to these higher private institutions of education.
Yes.
Because my sister, Sarah Lawton, she applied to Northeastern. She applied to a couple of other BU. She applied to BU, and she wasn't accepted. Those schools don't accept BPS students a lot of the time, and I feel like it's unacceptable.
And
unacceptable.
We're approving their zoning. We're approving all their certificates that they need to be a Pac-Man and grow. Yeah. All right. Yeah. This is the type of thing when you look at this strike that the unions are having, they're fighting for a piece of themselves, right? Not to be used and sold like that. There's residual wealth there. When you look at the unions, they go there and they build that building. They're living large for the time that building's built.
Yes.
But after they're gone, that building brings in millions and millions and millions of dollars. That means so when you're coming right in initially and making the negotiation for that contract, there's a whole lot of wealth that's not under discussion. I think that needs to translate to institutions. And I look at getting more out of them. To deal with these problems.
Outstanding.
Right? Are you kidding me? This is the smartest city in the world. The leaders of the world send their people here. Yes. How can we sit here and have this? Part of the new part of the district is in the South End. That encompasses Mass and Cass. I don't know about anybody else, but I've been down there. I have a student down there that we need to find, right? But, the dichotomy is when you cross Albany Street, it's a tale of two districts. You have these tall high rises and things like that. So when you look at the district that was created for District 3, it's kind of a mess, right? But it's a new district, an opportunity for a new identity. And, what's going to power this district is the unity of saying the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We need to all, from the South End to South Boston to Roxbury to Dorchester, we need to squeak together. We're not going to agree with everybody on the other issue, but I can tell you as your city council, I will respect your issue enough to make sure that you have a public hearing.
And with that said, right, and I really do appreciate that because, again, living in Fields Corner, and I've lived there, right, so it's, the notion of little Vietnamese, right, lots of Vietnamese communities, and listen, I'm learning the language, I go support the businesses, listen, we're all welcome, but listen, and I try to learn the language so I can go in and get my fruit and go in and know the little places and so forth, but now they've got little Saigon cultural district, right? Yeah. So I'm seeing all these little, but what I don't see, right? And no disrespect, because I go to the Dominican barbershop and I go to the different, of all these different communities that are seeming to have a level of power and presence from the contractors that are buying the buildings, right, to building the buildings, to the residents who are living above the business on the ground level that's run by folks of cultures that are not black, or I'm gonna just call it what it is, because we talk about communities of color, right? And all those folks make up communities of color, but African Americans, right? And I'm saying I'm an African American who was born here. Take my ancestors were brought here, right? Didn't come here this wasn't something that they fought and drove through. Like people who come from other countries who made great sacrifice to be here. And I applaud that and don't resent that. However, I do think that it's important to acknowledge people who are here disconnected from my African culture, relegated to a second-class citizen in this country, and in this city of Boston as a black man feels oftentimes that I'm being, talk about microaggressions, I'm feeling more and more or less empowered as a black man, and places that black men and people of African Americans can go to have culture.
Well, I think this is where you have to have the empathy. You know, my ancestors, one half of my family, the ancestors, were enslaved. You know, I have a family in Alabama. When my great-great-grandfather was sold from Alabama to South Carolina, that's where the South Carolina lineage is up there. So clearly there was damage done. There's residual damage done. Again, the mistake is not a mistake until you refuse to correct it. So I think that conversation is being held right now. And when you think about it, Senator Bill Owens, when he was introducing that in the 80s, and everybody, even black people, were like, what? What? Can't get far from here. And we've come a long way. So, you know, I'm optimistic about the future, because right now there's pushback on the status quo that has not been delivering. When you look at the procurement from the city, you know, a $1.9 billion budget for procurement, and I'm quoting something from like a couple of years ago. I could imagine that it's worse. I haven't seen anything that would make it worse. But the top 90%, you're talking about less than 5%, go to women and people of color. And this has been forever. And that needs to change. Just imagine if 30 years ago we would have said, we're going to invest in your business, we're going to give you some capital, we're going to help you. Because when I started my own business up here in Boston, I got a $1,000 technical grant from a gentleman named Chuck Grigsby that said, we're going to give you a technical grant so you can hire an accountant to do pro formas for you, so you can sell your business and say, we project this type of growth and you are worth this amount of credit. I would not have been able to get an office downtown had I not had that assistance from the city. Now, if we would have done that 30 years ago, we would have women-owned businesses, all kinds of businesses that have been in business for years. You know how they say, been in business since 1982, right. All this stuff. We didn't have that.
No.
You know, we're so that type of thing needs to change. And I would just say to you, drive through the district.
Yeah.
Go through the district. Look at the businesses. Yeah. Black, white, Vietnamese, whatever you want to call it. My name's in the window. That's not by accident. My name's in the window. It's ubiquitous. And it's because I have this relationship. Not only do I know where they are, I use them.
How about that?
And they're probably, here comes that man again. He's got an idea of how I can grow my business. Listen, you know, especially for the new businesses, I love it when they come in. I say, look, I'll even come and help you. Let's do some flyers, go around, walk the neighborhood to let people know that you're here. You know, have a day where you give out a little bit of free food. That'll get them in there. And if it's good, they'll come back. But better commercial.
Listen, like you said, we got to do this again. If you believe it or not, we really only have 3 minutes.
I told you needed 2 hours.
Well, listen, we got to have you come back. We got to have you come back. But real quickly, I do want to say, so a person asks, are you in the process of, or as you're in the process of running for office, are you also preparing for the future by mentoring someone or someone's in the political process to one day take your seat?
Yeah, I have some wonderful students. Andrew Swain, who served in leadership position at the Roxbury Y. I have Emmanuel Allen, who's the head of. I mean, I have students that are all over the place that are producing and all of that, and so it's wonderful to see that legacy. I would just say, LawtonForDistrict3.com. You can get all the information there, get some education. Understand that I'm real, that I've trained for this position, and I'm an independent thinker.
Awesome. Lastly, I'll say, so Eric asked some of these questions, and this is with regards, this was specifically as a returned citizen who's both been behind the wall and now has returned. You talked about your platform for returning citizens, which I appreciate that's even in there without having it to be asked or to be, added in there. That was part of what you've already been doing.
11 pieces. I only talked about 3.
Exactly. So I love that. But it says, what is your vision for prison reform? You talked about some of that, but quickly, while in office, what have you done to push programs to help returning citizens for those candidates that are seeking re-election? And if elected, what do you plan to further programming and resources for returning citizens?
I am mentoring all the time. Unfortunately, I've lost some students to violence, but I also have some that have been incarcerated and they've come out and they need that recommendation. They need that support from somebody that's respected in the community. They need that. So I'm available for that. I tell my students, once my student, you're always my student. And understanding too that the teacher just doesn't teach. The teacher also learns.
Yes.
And I got one